Turkey's foreign minister says Africa is positioning itself to have a greater role in the 21st century. But what challenges lie ahead for the continent and its 1.5 billion people? And how can Turkey, which is already boosting its trade, defense, and diplomatic ties with dozens of countries, help achieve those goals? I'll break it all down here on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. African solutions to African problems. That's one of the key points Turkey's top diplomat, Hakan Fidan, made at a regional conference with African ministers in Djibouti. Fidan covered specific areas that Ankara is looking to step up in its engagement with the continent. Everything from boosting defense ties, mediating conflicts, and expanding energy cooperation were on the table. Engin Savcı has this report.
It's a relationship that is growing beyond trade. The Turkey-Africa Partnership Conference has become a regular platform for Ankara to engage the continent. At the most recent meeting in Djibouti, Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan reiterated the importance of Africa's rightful place in the international community. He highlighted the increase in defense deals with Turkey and cooperation on combating terrorism and other security issues.
Turkey wants peace and stability in Africa. To that end, we extend our helping hand to our friends who want it. We share our experience in the fight against terrorism. We conduct mediation.
Turkish ties with Africa go back decades. Starting out as the African Initiative Policy in 1998, Turkey would go on to receive observer status in the African Union in 2005. It was granted strategic partner status just 3 years later. Turkey's engagement with Africa initially focused on humanitarian aid, education, and cultural initiatives. But over time, it evolved to include security partnerships and mediation roles. Ankara's trade relationship with the continent also expanded eightfold, surpassing $35 billion in 2023. These growing ties came as parts of Africa were hit by crisis and when traditional outside powers were seeing their influence wane. Between 2020 and 2023, several former French colonies in the Sahel region were rocked by coups and coup attempts. Dissatisfied with France's lingering influence and its security presence in the region, tens of thousands of protesters across Mali, Chad, and Burkina Faso took to the streets, rejecting its former colonial rulers. After French troops withdrew from the region and with their African allies toppled, Western capitals feared the vacuum would be filled by Russia and China. Turkey's involvement also increased during this time, an engagement that many Africans argued didn't have the colonial or imperialist legacy as other powers. Ankara's humanitarian aid approach, coupled with increasing trade, won many hearts and minds on the continent. But its diplomatic initiative to mediate conflicts was especially sought after. Having supported Libya's UN-backed government in Tripoli during its civil war, Ankara repositioned itself as a mediator. They hosted Libya's rival governments in 2022, hoping to reach a political solution. To further help stabilize tensions, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan mended ties with his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who supported the opposing side in Libya. Both pledged cooperation in politics, security, trade, tourism, and joint humanitarian efforts in the wider region. But it is in the Horn of Africa where the stakes could be the highest. Turkey, which has invested heavily in Somali infrastructure and defense, signed an energy cooperation deal with Mogadishu this year. Ankara also hosted multiple meetings to help mediate growing tensions between Somalia and neighboring Ethiopia over the disputed region of Somaliland. Back in Djibouti, Fidan supported the African Union's permanent membership to the G20 and called for reform of the UN Security Council for better efficiency of the Union. How this is accepted by the West remains to be seen. Engin Savcı, Straight Talk.
And for more, joining me now from Trieste in Italy is Federico Donelli. He's an assistant professor at the University of Trieste. From Bournemouth in the UK is Hannah Ryder. She's the CEO of Development Reimagined. And from London is Michael Amoah. He's a visiting senior fellow at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining me now. a very important conference between Turkey and many of the African nations that it's partnered up with. I want to begin with Federico. What would you say were the most important points or topics that were discussed at this summit?
I think that the most important one is related to the future of Turkey and African states relationship. And we know that is in ongoing relationship. If we consider that almost it began in 20 years ago and it changed a lot during these 20 years. So most probably the idea of Turkey right now is to try to establish a strengthened relationship in terms of international and cooperation, of course, but also in terms of security. We know that security sector is one of the most important right now for Turkey, for the industry. So it's important to establish a closer link in terms of security as well, also because Turkey wants to play a global role in mediation and in this kind of things. So yeah, I think security could be the main focus of this partnership conference.
Hannah, there's a lot of countries that are interested in getting a foothold in Africa, increasing its relationship with African countries. You have superpowers like the United States, China, Russia, that are very interested. Also, colonial players like France, England as well. Where does Turkey fit in and what does it bring to the table?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Look, we just in September had the Forum on China Africa Cooperation. There was just last week the Commonwealth Summit, which had a lot of African countries there. There is a lot of activity and discussion with African countries. But what sets Turkey apart is really, first of all, that Turkey was one of the first countries to have an Africa strategy, a full Africa strategy back in 1998. And since then, we've seen, trade grow fivefold. We've seen foreign direct investment from Turkey increase in African countries. Yes, also security partnerships and so on. But I think one of the refreshing aspects about engagement from Turkey and many other, I guess one could call them emerging economies with African countries is really this sense that economic development is the ambition, and economic development in African countries is the ambition. And while security can become important, it is not at the forefront of the discussion. It's more, well, if we have to support on security, if there is a mutual interest, then we will. However, economic development, trade, investment is at the forefront, and that is most important. And I think that's where African countries have seen Turkey as an important partner, being able to think about the long-term implications and the long-term partnerships, not just what is right there in the short term.
Michael, when we look at Africa, there's many countries that want to have a partnership there, that want to penetrate African markets. What does Turkey have specifically to offer that would give it a comparative advantage to, let's say, a superpower like the United States or China or Russia that has a lot more tools to be able to utilize in its diplomatic and its economic relations?
Well, I mean, you're very right. There's quite a lot of competition going on. I mean, with the United States, Russia, China. Now, Turkey is as an emerging, key partner on the scene, attempting to also carve its own niche on the African political and security landscape. I think what Turkey brings to the table is actually that Turkey does not have any imperial or neo-colonial ambitions, first of all, and therefore Africa sees Turkey as a somewhat neutral interlocutor who can be used to engage, what's going on. What is interesting, though, is that Africa is at the same time also seeking to pursue its own foreign policy and security interests. And therefore, it would appear that Turkey at the moment is quite a very good partner that Africa sees in that respect, particularly with the Horn of Africa security situation, where Turkey has been seen to successfully broke out some rapprochement between Somalia and Ethiopia, or Somalia and Somaliland, now attempting to, a rapprochement between Egypt and Ethiopia and all that. So the key thing really is that Turkey is seen as a neutral interlocutor, and more importantly also that Turkey has some important things to offer on the table, perhaps maybe with the supply of drones, as well as also being ready to engage in some of the mineral explorations, for example, oil and other things. So Turkey currently seems to be an interesting partner at the moment. What we don't know going forward in the future, for example, I mean, anything can change by tomorrow after the US presidential elections. The geopolitical situation is so fluid at the moment. Anything can change in the next month, 2-3 months. And that seems to be some sort of gauging method by which both Africa and Turkey could be leveraging the actual terrain which they're engaged in.
Federico, Michael mentioned the security perspective of the relationship a little. When we look at Turkey, what it's done in Somalia, what it's done in Libya as well, how do you see the security relationship, especially on a bilateral level with African nations, going forward, maturing or developing further? Do you see any space for further cooperation with other countries, maybe a Niger, for example, or any other countries?
I think that we have to consider the big picture. And if we see from the African nation perspective, we have seen many security challenges. At the time, there are also multiple opportunities for African states, and multiple opportunities means that they can find new cooperation agreement, new bilateral cooperation agreement with multiple actors. And Turkey is one of these actors, and especially Turkey is one of the actors that is able to provide not only weapons, so not only in terms of military hardware, but also in terms of knowledge, military knowledge. This is important if we consider that one of the biggest challenges in many different African states is related to armed groups and insurgencies phenomenon. So Turkey, I think, is able to establish new link with multiple different African states. And of course, this is a good thing for African states as well, because Turkey is a NATO member. So we can say that in political terms, it has less cost than establish a link or relationship with Russia or China in the eyes of the United States.
Hannah, I want to ask you about infrastructure, because Turkish construction firms have gotten a lot of big projects over the past years in Rwanda, in Nigeria, just to name a few, many other examples as well. What gives Turkish companies a competitive advantage in this aspect, being able to get these contracts versus, say, a United States or a powerhouse like China?
Yeah, so we have seen Turkey, as you say, emerging as a infrastructure construction partner, both in terms of, not particularly necessarily in terms of lending, but in terms of being able to win contracts that are either procured by African governments or through African or multilateral development banks, where the firms have shown themselves to be both cost-effective, but also quick delivery, very much like Chinese firms, and unlike other European ones, for example. But with Turkey, I think the cost-effectiveness certainly matters, and also the ability to really look at the different key standards, setting up certain standards that the countries might want, or even presenting these kinds of standards to African governments. We've seen African governments say, well, we like the kinds of projects that Turkey delivers. And I think that's where, again, that competitive edge can come in. But one thing that certainly Turkish firms could be thinking about is to be not just winning bids, but actually going into more public-private partnerships where they bring in investment from Turkey into African countries. And I think that will also create even more space for Turkey, not not just to be influential and make friends, but also to benefit economically with its firms being abroad and entering these markets. These are growth markets. We've seen so much more foreign direct investment, and I think Turkey can do even more.
Michael, one of the main areas that Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan talked about is cooperation against climate change together with Africa. Now, in almost every projection, future forward-looking projection, we see Africa as one of the geographies that are going to be hit hardest by climate change. How could Turkey and Africa or the African Union work together to combat climate change?
That's a very good question. I think that with climate change, I mean, one role that Turkey can play is about the negotiations between the global south and the global north with regard to climate financing. I mean, obviously, Africa has quite a lot of the critical minerals that are necessary for the global green energy transition, cobalt, tin, the rest of it. However, at the moment, well, most of the global north countries that are the biggest polluters have failed to deliver on what was promised for climate financing in the last 10 years. And currently, the global south is negotiating with the global north about the new trillions of money that has to be put on the table for that. And I think that in this respect, Turkey can probably play a key role in ensuring that whatever amount is agreed this time, that the global north will actually faithfully deliver what they have to. And I think that's where the sort of negotiations with the UNFCCC, the next Conference of Parties conference, perhaps next month in Baku, is going to be key, because we think at that point, the calculation would have been made about exactly how much the global north needs to put on the table and the delivery methods and all that. So I think Africa will expect Turkey as a neutral interlocutor and a partner of the global south to play a key role in negotiating the terms of climate financing.
Federico, irregular migration's been a huge problem, as there's been many frozen conflicts that have been reheated, new conflicts such as Libya, new meaning over the past decade, creating big waves of migration. But there's also been climate migration, economic migration, and throughout the Mediterranean, one of the first stops have been continental Europe. How could Turkey work together with African countries? And we've seen some of that cooperation in Libya with Turkey, but what role can Turkey play in helping stop irregular migration, or at least making it safer than it currently is, and within some type of legal schedule?
Well, if we consider also the position of the foreign minister, Hakan Fidan, we can see how Turkey also want to mitigate or trying to mitigate the effect or the deep causes of migration. And the discourse about climate change is related also to the migration as well. So I think that Turkey can play on the two different tables. On one hand, it can play with especially with European Union and European country, in order to find a strengthened cooperation to address the phenomenon of illegal migration. At the same time, strengthen cooperation with African states and other states or transitional states where migration flow passing through, in order to operate in two ways, in terms of clash this kind of illegal migration, at the same time to find a solution to the deep causes of migration. And in this case, the sustainable model and development model of Turkey could be a good way or third way for development of African states in some area of sub-Saharan Africa, but also of Maghreb.
Mm-hmm. The Turkish foreign minister also praised African nations for their support for Gaza. And the foreign minister said, "We believe that Africa can play an instrumental role in supporting the Palestinian cause and in stopping Israel." Now, Hannah, obviously South Africa playing a huge role at the ICJ by opening up the case on genocide. What more can African countries do, and how can they work with Turkey on this issue?
I mean, I think there are many things that African countries can do. They have been obviously working through the UN in terms of showing their solidarity and support. They've also, as you mentioned, South Africa has been at the forefront, and many African states have supported South Africa's position and what South Africa is doing. Not only that, we also, after the Brazilian presidency of the G20, we're moving into the South African presidency of the G20, which is, effectively the economic version of the UN Security Council. And there are obviously discussions as well on some of these sorts of issues. We've had, significant disagreements between G20 members, for example, on the approach on Russia-Ukraine. And of course, there are likely to be significant disagreements on the Israeli-Palestinian question, also in the G20. But the African Union, now being a member of the G20, of course, also creates space for stronger African voice there. And again, Turkey is there too. And these are coalitions and groupings that African countries can work together with others to create more space for at least dialogue and discussion. And I would say creative solutions. What South Africa has been doing is not just looking at the international order as it is, but also thinking how can we come up with new ideas which actually create solutions which may be ideally even more long-lasting than the ones we have been set in before. So I think that's where Turkey can provide that space. African countries can also provide that space as mediators.
Michael, I want to get into some of the bilateral relationships. I think one of the most important ones is between Turkey and Egypt, a rapprochement ongoing. How are you viewing this normalization process, and can this normalization between Turkey and Egypt have a positive impact on Turkey's relationship with the broader continent?
Yeah, this particular one is a very tricky assignment in that we have the coalition of troops in Somalia at the moment, where all the troop contributing countries are needed properly to be engaged. But then Somalia is making complaints that perhaps they don't want the Ethiopian troops, and Egypt is also trying to offer troops. At the same time, Egypt is negotiating with Ethiopia about Somalia and perhaps maybe Eritrea. And in that mix, it would appear that Turkey seems to be, as usual, the neutral interlocutor who can be sort of trusted to engage at a level field where some sort of trust, you first of all need trust to be able to come to the negotiating table. And I think that level of trust has already been established among the partners in the Horn of Africa, whereby they're prepared to have Turkey as an interlocutor to negotiate the positions. Mm-hmm. So it's quite interesting at this stage. However, it's also a little bit tricky in the sense that you don't quite know exactly how Egypt is going to tick. You don't quite know exactly how Ethiopia will react. The key thing really is that we need troop contributing countries to actually make sure that they've contributed enough troops to handle Somalia as we speak. And that is really very important. This issue about Egypt, Ethiopia, Turkey Somalia at the moment is a challenge for all parties. And I think that there needs to be some level-headedness to make sure that the African Union is able to broker a deal that would benefit Somalia and also maintain some stability in the security situation, in particular the Horn of Africa. So perhaps what Turkey is actually being expected to do is to be that safe pair of hands of an interlocutor who will be able to bring some stability to the negotiation table.
Mm-hmm. The Turkey-Egypt relationship definitely bigger than just Turkey-Egypt, especially when we look at the dynamics in Africa. Federico, Libya, that has been basically, let's not call it a frozen conflict of late, but it has become stagnant as we're trying to reach some normalization, a free and fair election. Turkey playing a very important role there. I want to ask you, what can Turkey do going forward? And, well, you're in Italy right now. What can Italy also do?
Yeah, well, we recognize that how Turkey has been able to stabilize Libya during the last 2-3 years. And of course, it is an important stakeholder for the future process of normalization. From the Italian perspective, a stable Libya is an important aim, not only for the migration issue that is, of course, important from the domestic perspective, but also for the energy interest. I think that Turkey and Italy can find a convergence of strategic interest in stabilize Libya and try to create a common ground in the political sphere for the future of Libya. So I think that we can expect more cooperation between these two Mediterranean countries in the next couple of months.
Federico, Hannah, Michael, thank you for your valuable insight in helping me unpack the Turkey-Africa relationship. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.